Oh, don't say that.
No.
So you can ask him for some money?
No. Yeah, I might ask him for money.
All seriousness, I get to, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, I get to the Myrtle Beach welcome home event.
Yep.
First of all, and the guy apologized profusely, but Chris, we got another call me Chris
Let's
guy.
go.
So
man.
it
That's
is
twice in
it
a
is
row.
shifted. It is shifted a little bit.
The dynamic is changing.
And two, like within 3 minutes of me being there, somebody was like, "Oh, somebody finally won the Grand Slam money." They were literally talking about it at the Gamecock Club welcome home event in Myrtle Beach. So, hey, those things, it's a great marketing tool.
It 1,000% is like the low release of special teams thing. It took on kind of a life of its own to when it finally happens, everybody recognizes like, oh my God, it finally happened. It's really funny though. And look, the Gamecocks have been in so many bases loaded situations this season where you think like, oh man, this might finally be the time. In a weird way, that was actually the farthest thing from my mind when Dalton Reeves went up to the plate yesterday. There were already 2 outs. Gamecocks had already scored a couple runs out of an inning. I'm like, okay, maybe knock in a couple guys with an RBI here or at worst fly out or ground out and in the inning. I was not thinking about a grand slam, especially at a park like that is very hard to hit out of. And yes, you had 2 home runs earlier on in the inning, and then it goes. And I'm like, oh my God, it finally happened.
Yeah, it happened. Man, how good has Dalton Reeves been since they inserted him into the lineup? You look at him and Brindling, and, there have been obviously some downs with this team down the stretch, but those 2 guys have been fantastic, and that was clearly the shot in the arm they needed. And at a place that is traditionally just very difficult to hit the ball out, South Carolina had the ball flying all over the place. Exactly what they needed, right? Like, there's just something different about being in a dugout when things go your way. And, kudos to Casas as well. Like, I feel like you look at a 10-5 game and you might be like, solo shot early on doesn't mean much. But it seemed to, and this is, I'm riding down the road listening on the radio, so full disclosure there. But just even listening to Derek and Stewart, it just seemed to break the tension for South Carolina, and then they get another home run, and then you're right back in the game after you had the absolute worst start to this game you possibly could have had.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really felt like when Alabama jumped on them 3-0 in those first couple of innings, we were kind of thinking, oh boy, here we go again. Going to be another one of those games where you give up, 7, 8, 9 runs or something like that and end up losing, only putting, 2 on the board or something along those lines. But that switch flips in the 3rd inning, and South Carolina's in control from there. And obviously we can't talk about what happened yesterday without giving love to Chris Veach, who, we knew it was going to be all hands on deck from a pitching standpoint. And, Coach Kingston, with their back up against the wall, was going to throw out whoever they needed to go out there and try and win the game. And, Eskew gave up those couple runs. Becker came in trying to get a handle on things. And then Veach comes in, and he's somebody that this season had never pitched more than 2 2/3 of an inning, or 2 2/3 of an outing. So you expect him to go out there, maybe get a couple of innings, hopefully get things back under control. But he's just absolutely dealing. And credit to Coach Kingston and Coach Williams for rolling with him as long as he was hot, and him making it through the rest of the game and putting on an incredible performance yesterday to pick up that win.
Yeah, he had Alabama baffled. The Bugs Bunny changeup, as they say, was fantastic, and it appears that he's maybe like he seems fresh to finish the year. Like his fastball, and I know all the different. Seems like you can't get an honest reading on these pitch speeds to save your life. Like different ones say different things, but he maybe has an extra tick on the fastball as well, which I think makes that changeup play even more. And in some ways, I thought this was a little bit more validation for the thought of putting him out there earlier last week with, when Garrett Gainey's giving you this phenomenal start, and, the game is essentially on the line, and, they tried to extend him and they didn't go. And the word was, hey, we were waiting. We wanted him to get the final 3 to 6 outs. And, to me, now credit them for adjusting a bit and just saying, look, the game is potentially on the line right now. You're always going to have a plan, but the 8th or 9th inning doesn't matter if you can't get through the middle innings with a lead. And I think more and more in baseball, you see teams, especially in college ball, you don't necessarily have to have a closer who comes in and just pitches the ninth or just pitches the eighth and ninth. Sometimes the key innings are in the middle. And the beauty of that is, what if you bring in that guy and he's just on? What if you bring in that guy and he works through a couple of quick innings? Then you have the opportunity to extend him versus feeling like you're having to piece it together. And that's exactly what happened. Again, I was listening on the radio, but those guys do a great job of telling the story of the game. And Veach was just masterful and couldn't have come at a better time. Now you get into the double elimination part of this thing. I think, Chris, solidify yourself to where you're not having to watch other teams and other tournaments and worried about the tournament. You don't know what your draw is going to be, but now you can breathe easy on the fact that you're in.
Yeah, and Kingston hit on that a little bit after the game. Of course, he painted the picture that he thought South Carolina was or should have been solidly in, even if they had lost. And maybe that was true, but I think he does have a point that going and winning one game at least in Hoover helps kind of put an exclamation point on that, where even if let's say you get knocked out in the double elimination part, maybe you're not in the best position you could be, but you've at least put yourself, solidly in the tournament. And that counts for something. But, to go back to earlier in this game, Alabama obviously gets up 3-0 to back up to that portion. And you're going, okay, is this going to be another one, like you said, Tyler? But South Carolina able to obviously chip away, take the lead. But then something that we've seen this season a few times is South Carolina is able to respond, but then the other team saw it a lot against Georgia, right? Respond right back. Alabama has not been a great team this year, but they do have a bunch of good hitters, especially at the top of their lineup. They got some speed. They got some pop in the bats. And so to insert Veach early in the game, Becker gave them some good pitches, some good outings, some good innings. But you bring in Veach early, you definitely are not holding him out for some later scenario. And he ends up putting in, I agree with your wording there, Wes, a masterful performance where he ends up slamming the door on Alabama. Because remember, South Carolina goes up, 6-3, but then Bama responds in the fourth with 2 runs. Now it's a 6-5 game. Veach comes in early, and they actually get a couple of hard-hit balls off of him, and you're going, okay, is Veach going to be Veach? Turns out, very quickly, he answered that question. He absolutely was, and it was huge.
And that also sets you up better for today and theoretically tomorrow as well, because you guarantee yourself 2 games, but winning the first round, where you only had to go through 3 guys yesterday. And, we knew the approach initially was going to be kind of like on Saturday, where everybody gets roughly 2 innings one time through the lineup, then you move on to the next guy. But again, Veach is dealing. You stick with him. He's able to finish out the game. That saves you at least an arm or 2 that you could potentially use today or tomorrow that you otherwise would have had to use yesterday.
Yeah, it does. And I think now that you're guaranteed 2 games, you do start to kind of piece it together in your head. And I still think we talked to Jack yesterday. And the thought process was, Jack Veltry's thought process was, if you have a chance to go win this game, you really can't think about tomorrow. And, you can play it a little bit differently now that you're guaranteed 2 games. I still think if you have a lead and you have a chance to just kind of go for the kill, that you do it. But it does maybe change your thinking just a little bit in terms of having a plan that can be adjusted and tweaked as you go, but a broad plan on how you're going to cover the next 18 innings.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Let's say today, if they get into the 8th or 9th inning, they have a 1 or 2 run lead, and you have the option to maybe bring in Gainey to close out with those final 6 outs, or think about using him tomorrow in a starting role. And again, I agree with you. I think you go for the kill, try and get the win today if possible. But at the same time, you do have to think ahead to tomorrow, whether that be an elimination game or another game in the winner's bracket. So it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Kingston and Coach Williams go about strategizing this today.
Well, if Gainey shuts it down for you, then it's not a elimination game the next day.
That's
so
true.
My thought would be if I've got a lead, and also it depends on how he feels. I mean, that was
Friday. So
okay,
you're on your full rest at this point, 5 days.
Yeah, you're close to it. So if he feels good today and you got to make sure, because I feel like he's probably a guy who'd tell you he's good even if his arm is hanging by its side. But just because he's a competitor, I mean, if the game is there to be taken, I think you take it and go to wild man there, Garrett Gainey. And, I mean, who would have thought, like, it just goes to show you really, truly never know. Who would have thought we'd be sitting here talking about Garrett Gainey if you looked at his bio coming in as arguably South Carolina's best pitcher? I mean, he's been that the last month. And so, you know, I don't know exactly what he has found lately compared to his previous career, but, yeah, if it's there for the taking, I think you insert Gainey.
And Gainey's such an interesting case because we saw that dominance from him early in the season where you're playing non-conference opponents. Yes, he gave up the one home run to Clemson. That was his one earned run for a long time. There seemed to be a little bit of a bump in the road when he started conference play. Like there was almost an adjustment that he needed to get used to playing this level of competition week in and week out. But once he finally found that, again, these past couple weeks, he's been clicking on all cylinders. And again, has emerged as your best pitcher on staff at this point in time. And maybe Veach is kind of positioning himself to be that second guy. But, you know, Gainey adapted. And now, again, is that arm that you can really rely on that you're going to need over the course of not only this tournament, but the NCAA tournament coming up next week as well.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you play elite competition, they're going to humble you, even the best guys. I mean, let's go back. South Carolina's done it to other guys, too, not only this season, but just in recent memory. I mean, we all see what Paul Skeens is doing at the pro level and what he did in college. And Ethan Petrie, as a freshman, you know, humbled him last year by depositing one of his fastballs over the left field wall. And so when you play great competition, you know, yes, sometimes for guys there is an adjustment period. Sometimes you're going to have off days and rough days. And South Carolina certainly as a team gone through a rough patch, and there's been some of everything, you know, hitting issues, fielding issues, pitching issues. Yesterday they were able to put those things together more, and so we'll see. Will that be kind of contagious to where they can get back on the right track on the whole?
Well, and real quick, Tyler, this is a guy, his ERA was 7.28 at Liberty.
Yeah.
So, I mean, his turnaround, and I don't bring that up to, like, embarrass him or disparage him, but the turnaround has been incredible. So kudos to him. Whatever the adjustments have been, it's been night and day, and it's been awesome for Carolina.
We'll continue to talk about baseball from yesterday. Let's hear about what Coach Kingston had to say after yesterday's game and then preview Arkansas a little bit coming up next. Want to remind you, coming up tomorrow morning, early game going to be live out at the Nest, 1331 Gadsden Street in the Vista from 6 until 9 a.m. And we're going to be out Friday at the Firehouse Subs on Forest Drive from 9 until noon. Come by and see us, and hopefully we're talking about more Gamecock baseball on Friday as well. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday here on The Game.
All right, tell you about one of our outstanding partners here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. It is our friends over at Integrated Media. Michael, Nathan, and his team can do everything that you may need at your home or your business from an audiovisual standpoint. And here's the great thing about Integrated Media. They are a local company. They've been to my home. They've been to Wes Mitchell's home. And they can come out to yours, too. They can do everything from sourcing the equipment so that you don't have to go to the big box stores. You can go right to their showroom in Chapin. Just give them a call, 803-948-8327, and schedule something up or just drop by. You can check out some of the equipment that they use there. They use top-of-the-line stuff, and they have outstanding customer service. Then they can come out to your home or your business and install it for you and do a great professional job. By a local company here in the Midlands. Again, Integrated Media, that's 803-948-8327 or integratedmediainc.com.
Obviously, big win for us. Coming into Alabama, playing Alabama in such a big game, I'm just so proud of our team and the effort and the execution. It all starts with the guy to my right, 5 2/3, no earned runs on that stage. Can't say enough about him and how proud I am of him, the competitor he is. We felt when we started him in that, what was it, the 4th inning, hey, if he can give us 2 or 3, that'll be tremendous. And he finished the game. So the great thing about postseason sometimes is guys start to create moments that they'll remember for the rest of their life. This is our first one in this postseason. I hope we have a lot more because, again, I think this team is very capable.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Towerhead, West Mitchell. Chris Clark along with you. That was Coach Kingston after yesterday's game, touting how big of a win that was and obviously praising Chris Veach for his incredible performance that helped South Carolina pick up the win over Alabama. They have now flipped with Alabama in the latest RPI rankings. Bama was at 18 yesterday. South Carolina moves up the 1 spot. Bama now falls to 19. And it's also interesting, and look, these RPIs move around a lot depending on what's happening in the tournament. Vanderbilt, in beating Florida yesterday, 6-3, actually jumped into the top 25, which now means South Carolina's record against quad 1 opponents goes to 13-19 as opposed to 10-18 yesterday. So resume continues to improve. As we said, the win yesterday, it pretty much solidifies them into the NCAA tournament. Now, whatever they do, if they can beat Arkansas, continue on in the winner's bracket, can just add to that, maybe move up on their seeding line a little bit for whatever regional they end up going to.
It does kind of go to show you, like, and I think certainly in baseball where you have this many teams, in basketball you have so many teams, the numbers are valuable. Like, you can sort of I see why fans kind of hate some of the numbers, but it can be valuable to help you make sense of it. But it is a little bit ridiculous, like where you draw that line. That, like, I know there has to be a line somewhere, but
right.
So then Vandy all of a sudden, because of that sweep, completely changes the picture for South Carolina as far as that. But then if Vandy loses 2 in a row, are they right back outside the top 25? And then and then it changes it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So now South Carolina has the is tied for the 3rd most quad 1 wins out of I think anybody in the country.
Wow.
And it flips that quickly.
Yeah, that's wild. So I mean, the numbers are kind of they're out there, I think, but you feel good about being in. And now I think, all right, we got this, like Kingston said, this awesome postseason performance from Veach. He's a competitor. Veach is. He's a guy that steps up. He's a guy I think now you feel like that couldn't have turned out better for South Carolina, because I think if they're in a key scenario in the regional now, be it 4th, 5th, 3rd, inning, whatever it may be, and you need somebody to come in and get some key outs and stop the bleeding, maybe this is your blueprint for that. Like, Veach doesn't have to be the closer at the end of a game. Now, that opens up another question, especially with Gainey starting now. However, I think this is a good blueprint for you. Now, the next step, to me, obviously you want to beat Arkansas today. More important than that to me is that Eli Jones goes and has a good start. If you told me, I would almost say if you told me South Carolina, and I'm talking big picture, and I know, again, some people have given up on the season, but obviously the dugout has not. That locker room has not given up on the season. You don't fight back down 3-0 at a place you just have not played well if you've given up on the season. They had a lot of heart, a lot of energy. That's to be commended. To me, if you almost told me I could get a Eli Jones phenomenal start, but South Carolina lost the game today, or another sort of poor start from your starter, but Carolina won, I would take the great start from Eli Jones, because you're going to have Eli Jones at his best if you're going to make a run.
Well, funny enough, the last time Eli Jones really gave South Carolina a quality start was against Arkansas. Now, right at a month ago, went 4 innings, giving up 7 hits and just 1 earned run in that game. Since then, the Kentucky series, Missouri, Georgia, and then Tennessee this past weekend have all kind of gone haywire for him. So maybe this is the perfect team to get him back on track. So for the Eli Jones we saw earlier on this season.
Yeah, I do think, I agree with you, Wes. It's very important for this team to, like, if you feel like you're solidly in, the most important thing now is to be playing your best ball, right? To be, even if you drop a game, even if you don't go win this thing in Hoover, which I don't think anybody's sitting around going, oh, you need to go win it, or you should go win it. Like, I don't think people expect that. people haven't expected that out of really good elite South Carolina baseball teams. Just historically, it hasn't happened. Could it this year? Who knows? It's an even more like fragmented year than ever. It's kind of difficult to tell in the SEC, which might get like 11 teams.
Should be a record
in the NCAA tournament. I actually thought, by the way, that was actually a pretty good point by Mark Kingston in that if you've got 11 teams that deserve to go in, put 11 teams in, because if you only have 7 or 8 to deserve, you're not going to give anybody a charity entry either into the tournament.
And look, we're watching here, know, LSU, who took care of Georgia yesterday. They're up early on Kentucky in game number 2. They were one of those teams that's on the bubble, and they're playing some of their best baseball right now.
You never know. Here's a question I have, y'all. What does, because Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central was talking about this morning, what does South Carolina have to do to be back in the, could they host a regional territory? Because, man, that is a big...
I think you'd have to probably run the table, or at least make it to Sunday to get that far, because they fell hard these past couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a tall order to get back into hosting a regional.
Yeah, I think it's tough. Now, I'll say this. Hey, don't let LSU get hot. Like that's one of those teams, just tradition, expectations. You know they have talent. Yeah. And I was listening, apparently, they play as many young guys, like as many freshmen as anybody out there. So maybe they're starting to kind of all click. That's a team, you look up there, LSU's the 11 seed. If I'm on a host and I'm we're hosting NCAA tournaments coming to our city.
Here's LSU.
And then I see LSU pop up, I'm in the back of my mind like, oh, heck no. You don't want to see them in your bracket for a regional. But yeah, you know what? To get back in the conversation, if you win these next 2 and now you've reeled off 3 in a row, maybe you start to get back into the bubble of being on that conversation, like being in the conversation. To actually get it, I don't know, man. That's tough, and there's so many other SEC teams that are in the mix for that as well. I think it's even valuable, though, now that you're in, to just put yourself in a better draw, even if it's a 2 seed. I think 2 seed versus 3 seed is even valuable. But then also, if you're one of the higher 2 seeds, they generally do try to give you a little bit better draw as far as who you're going to have to go through, which regional you're going to have to go through. So once you're in, there is value in moving up that board, even if it doesn't involve you actually being a host.
Yeah, if you're not going to be a host, be playing your best ball. Eli Jones, get him back on track with a great start. Be playing your best ball and improve your draw as much as possible, I think.
I still want to see him go to Clemson.
I do too. Now, it'll be, we all recognize it'd be very painful for Gamecock fans if they went there and that's how things ended. But you can think of the other scenario too.
I was going to say that would that might turn some people's minds on how they feel about this team if they were able to go in there and do that.
Well, it either, I think, the outcome would just be super simple. You know what I mean? And saying everybody's like almost back on board if you send Clemson home at their place versus just solidifying what a lot of people think about where things are right now with the program anyway if you lose. So it could be a very clear just, hey, here's where things are.
We'll see what happens again. Next game coming up today, taking on Arkansas. First pitch around 2 o'clock. Pregame coverage will start as it did yesterday at 1:15 with Derek Scott and Stuart Lake. We'll switch gears, go over to football, as there was another welcome home event in Myrtle Beach last night. Wes was there in person to talk to Coach Beamer. We'll hear a little bit about he had to say wrapping up the month of May. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, guys, once again, let me tell you about our friends over at Gold Line Framing. Obviously, it is graduation time for a lot of people right now. Maybe there's someone in your life who is getting that diploma, whether it's high school, whether it's college. Either way, give our friends at Gold Line Framing a call because you could give them an awesome present. Get that diploma custom framed at Gold Line Framing. You could get a Gamecock frame. You could even maybe get an orange frame if they go to that school in the upstate. Also, maybe there's other ideas you have. They could frame up original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags, signed prints. I know those are very popular these days. Whatever it is, call them. They'll create an idea for you, and then they'll frame it up for you as well. 803-739-1337. Also, they're open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and then on Saturdays as well, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. If you have questions or, again, you want to go ahead and set something up, call them today. Call them right now, 803-739-1337. That's Gold Line Framing.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you here on this Wednesday. Reminder, as always, you can check us out on the 107.5 The Game app. Download it on the Apple App Store, Google Play Store. Listen to us wherever you go. Also, watch us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. Now, the welcome home event last night in Myrtle Beach. Wes was in attendance there. Mentioned He was listening to the game on the radio as he was driving out there to hear what Coach Beamer had to say. And Beamer, as always, gets to talk to the media for about 10 to 15 minutes before going out there and speaking to the public. Was asked about a number of things. One in particular that our own Wes Mitchell did ask him about was a battle that's not getting a lot of attention this spring, as well as
should be
in comparison to some of the other positions that were up for grabs over the course of the past couple of weeks. That being left tackle. Let's go with cut number 18, Dave. This is Coach Beamer yesterday talking about the left tackle battle going on.
Yeah, kind of the same. Those guys are battling it out. Tree obviously started, 10 games, I think, last season at left tackle as well, so we know what he can do. And he's really working hard to take another step this year. Josiah came in as everything that we thought he was going to be. He was limited a little bit health-wise during spring practice, but this summer is really, really big for him to take another step. So I would say those two guys are certainly battling it out. In my mind, are kind of the top two. And then Ja'Kai would also be somewhat of a swing guy that could play guard and tackle, has played guard and tackle, where it gives you three guys right there that have the ability to play left tackle without a doubt. So those two guys, along with Ja'Kai, are still battling it out, and that's something that'll go into the season. But certainly we want to be able to identify, you have 5 on the field at a time. You'd love 10, but ideally 8 offensive linemen that you feel really, really solid about being in a rotation in every game.
So this is kind of a good problem to have, right? Where you have several good options at this spot, as opposed to a season ago where, again, you kind of had to, force your hand and move up a guy in Tree that maybe was not ideally ready at that point in time. Got the experience as the season went along, but again, knock on wood, hopefully everybody stays healthy. You're not having to be put in that position once again this season. But Tree's experience does put him ahead of the curve going into the season, given the fact that he got to play roughly half the year last year at this left tackle spot. But you bring in a guy in Josiah Thompson, who, again, very highly touted, very highly regarded coming in as a true freshman that is going to push for a starting position. And then you have Ja'Kai Moore kind of being that third option as a swing guy, as Beamer mentioned there, to also be in the mix there. So, again, good problem to have. A lot of high caliber talent competing for this spot that whoever ends up winning out, assuming nobody gets injured, is going to be the best person for the job.
Well, I think left tackle is, I would say, by far one of the hardest positions to fill when it comes to roster construction, recruiting, portal recruiting, all those things. So to go ahead and have a couple of guys that you feel pretty good about, now that doesn't mean, I don't want to get it misconstrued, that doesn't mean that these two guys are ready to be dominant forces in the SEC yet, but I do think in terms of upside potential, obviously you get to play 11 games last year. If your Tree Babalade started 9, that is valuable experience for a guy. And now you have who many people or some people has the number 1 offensive tackle in the country, and Josiah Thompson out of high school. Now you have the true freshman and Josiah pushing your true freshman who played a lot last year. So I do think you have to feel a good bit better about that spot than you did going into last year when, you remember when we kind of looked around a couple months before the season, and you're just like, man, that Jalen Nichols loss could be catastrophic for South Carolina. And it proved to be, honestly. And so you look at that, you look at where they are right now, it's still going to be a work in progress. But I think you feel pretty good about if something were to happen in a game, let's say it's starting out, let's say Tree is first, then it's Josiah, and Ja'Kai is that swing guy, you feel very, very confident about saying, all right, if there's an issue, I'm going to slide the next guy. If there's 2 issues, Ja'Kai Moore has played a ton in his career. Injuries, more than anything, I think have stopped him from having a much more complete career, than he has had. But I think you feel pretty good about that. The other potential option this gives you if Josiah keeps pushing, I think Tree is another guy. You look at his frame, you look kind of how just almost he's got that guard-looking wide body almost. I think he could potentially be another guy who could play multiple spots for you if Josiah is ready to be the left tackle.
Yeah, you have more options this year, which is always good. In some ways, you have a similar situation off the bat because, going into 2023, you lost Jalen Nichols because of his injury in the spring game, so you didn't have him, and then your options were a little bit more limited at the time. This year, you don't have Jalen Nichols because he went in the transfer portal in the offseason and is going to go play at, Memphis. And so then you're looking around going, okay, well, who's next? Because, if Jalen was here, he would have a really good chance to be the starting left tackle. He's been that before. He was in 2022. He was going to be in 2023. So then you go, okay, who's next? Well, now you have a Tree Babalade who is a year more seasoned. Now you do have one of the best freshman offensive tackles in the country. That may not be ideal, if unless he's just head and shoulders better than everybody, then maybe it is ideal. And you have Ja'Kai Moore as a guy who's played, I don't have it in front of me, 20, 30-something games in his career at multiple positions. You could also have emergency situations where you could slide somebody else over. You could always slide a Kason Henry, a Vershawn Lee. You feel like you've got more options there, which is certainly a positive going in.
44 career games for Ja'Kai Moore.
True. So it wasn't even 30.
44 career games, 28 starts.
So between Tree and Josiah Thompson, one of them wins the job. Are you looking to try and find another spot for whoever the backup ends up being to get on the field? And again, we talk about the right tackle spot, which feels like Casey Henry's got a pretty good lock on it, assuming that he stays healthy. Could one of those guys push for that spot as well if they don't end up getting left tackle?
They love Henry, it seems like, over there. I think if Tree wins the left tackle spot, I don't think you're necessarily moving Josiah around. I think that's your future anchor left tackle. Like, that's your guy. I frankly don't want him taking reps anywhere else. Even if it potentially meant he got on the field earlier, I want him learning that spot because I think he's that valuable potentially in the future as your left tackle. Now, if Josiah, who obviously is in his very first year of eligibility, is ready and he wins the job, then I absolutely think you could look at Tree any number of spots. It could be at right tackle. It could be a guard spot. Again, I do think they really like Kason Henry. They like the toughness there too. They like the leadership he brings. So could he beat him out at right tackle? I don't know. He'd face competition at these guard spots as well. There's a lot of guys fighting for playing time. So I think you don't know how it would play out. It's hard to project it. But, yes, if Josiah were to win left tackle, I think Tree probably too talented not to try to look at getting him on the field.
Yeah, certain guys that you would look at. We know South Carolina is going to cross-train guys, and that's not something that just South Carolina does. A lot of people do that. But I'm with you, Wes. Like, from a talent standpoint, could Josiah Thompson play, guard? Yeah, he could because he's a big guy who can move. But at the same time, not everybody who's an offensive lineman have left tackle skills. Some you go, he could be a guard or a center. Some people say, well, he could play right tackle or an interior spot. But to be a really, really good left tackle, that's kind of a different ball game. And Josiah Thompson is one of those guys where you look around and go, he's really got all the physical attributes and the size and the intelligence to be able to play that at a high level, so you need to keep him there and let him develop there.
We'll hear more from Coach Beamer, what he had to say at the Welcome Home event last night to wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next right here on The Game. It's after the sports minute.
Tell you about our presenting sponsor here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. It is Firehouse Subs, and as Tyler mentioned earlier, we will be out at the Firehouse Subs on Forest Drive in Columbia on Friday from 9 to noon. Come by and say hey. They'll be open at 10:30 onward. Come grab a delicious Firehouse Sub and say hey to us. But if you can't wait until Friday, I totally understand. I probably can't either, because Firehouse Subs is our go-to spot for lunch. They've also got dinner and catering for your entire family for that party that you got going on. Avoid the wait and order online so that your order is ready when you get to the closest Firehouse Subs near you using the Rapid Rescue to go. You can do that at firehousesubs.com or by downloading the Firehouse Subs app. That is my preferred method. It's the easiest way. You can find the location closest to you, use the Rapid Rescue to go, and your lunch, dinner, or catering will be waiting on you when you get there. Firehousesubs.com or use the Firehouse Subs app to order today.
Yeah, just that. He's a year older. I think last season was a great season for him to realize, not that he didn't already know, but just how disruptive he can be and how talented he is. And we're fortunate that we return our top 3 defensive tackles, really top 4, in Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley, Nick Barrett, and TJ. So to be able to bring those guys back, I thought TJ took a step last year and have every confidence in the world he's going to take another big step in 2024.
I hope if I turn my microphone on. Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour.
Rookie.
Presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you for a few more minutes here on your Wednesday. Coach Beamer yesterday at the Welcome Home event at Myrtle Beach talking about TJ Sanders, who, of course, we talked about earlier on this week. His name popped up on the On3 list of top 100 players returning to college football in 2024, coming in at number 51. And again, one of the premier players on this defense from a season ago. Had a breakout game against Georgia early on in the season. Had a couple sacks as the season went along. Like, really somebody to be excited about for this upcoming fall. And what we talked about earlier on this week is a very loaded and very talented defensive line room. TJ Sanders expected to kind of be the forefront, one of the leaders of this room when the fall rolls around.
Yeah, man, you've got, like we keep saying, you've got a lot of co-starters there. It's going to be fascinating to see who emerges as the best player, the best college player, the best NFL prospect. That may be different answers. I actually saw Tonka last night at the Myrtle Beach thing. He looks fantastic just off the hoof, like the best he probably has in his career. I feel like.
Is he even bigger, you think, or what do you mean by that?
I think now he told me he is the same weight, but he has like slimmed down actually a little bit in terms of just like he still looks like a defensive tackle. Don't get me wrong, like he's not out there looking like an edge guy, but looks like you want a 3 technique type defensive tackle to look, in my opinion. So I don't know. I mean, Tonka's had a really good career to this point. I think with all those guys, for me, whether it's Tonka, whether it's Boogie, whether it's TJ, Nick Barrett, he kind of gets forgotten with everybody else that's come in. DeAndre Jules, who, as Chris said, is going to have the NFL scouts very intrigued. Who out of that group can do it just more consistently? I think, like, we have seen all those guys have kind of takeover moments. And TJ, I think, is getting the love from On 3, probably from NFL scouts as well, just because you see the upside there in terms of NFL teams are going to get very wide-eyed when they see his size and then just his quickness off the line, how light he is on his feet. And for him, we saw it against Georgia last year. But can he do it consistently? I think that's really the question with all those guys, because they're all capable.
Yeah, it's probably going to be. Don't you think it'd be like more of a co-starter situation this year at defensive tackle, as opposed to having your top two? Because I mean, you look at it and it's easy to say, well, it's probably going to be, TJ and Tonka, or maybe it's TJ and Boogie. But I mean, you've got Jules would have been a starter at Pitt, and you may say, well, Pitt, whatever. I mean, this is a guy who, again, is drawing NFL buzz and is a graduate. DeAndre Jules is. He's played a lot of college football, and he's played quite well and has very much looked the part in Columbia. Then you've got Barrett. You got Monkel Goodwine in the mix, right? You've got some legitimate depth. So, the fascinating thing is just how you distribute. Who are the starters? How do you distribute the snaps? Who's the most consistent, like you said, Wes, because that's going to really dictate the playing time, who's most consistent in practice and in the games. And then you also have the added, storyline of 3-3-5 versus 4-man front, and you've got some different body types that can do some different things for you there.
Well, it's almost kind of a good problem to have you're going to split up the reps and be able to rotate these guys in, because that's, kind of the nature of the position. But regardless of what your combination is, whether it be 2 or 3 down linemen, you're going to have really good talent that's standing on the sidelines every given play. And again, that's a good problem to have at the end of the day.
That's what you want, because I think sometimes this is a South Carolina thing, in my opinion. Sometimes we, and I'm talking about, I talk a lot about the collective we, like the fans, the media, just people in the South Carolina sphere. We look at that like it's a bad thing. Like, hey, that guy has to play. Mm-hmm. You can't bring in this guy because he might put that guy on the bench. The really good teams, they have this depth, and the very definition of depth is that at times somebody's going to be on the sideline resting. Mm-hmm. And, but that is a position. Those guys can all play, and they all know it. And I mean that in both ways. They all can play and that they are all capable, and they all can play and that there are reps. There's playing time to go around for all of those guys. And I think they're old enough and mature enough to understand that. Like, I think from what we've heard, they get it. They understand it makes my life easier if you bring in a DeAndre Jules to help me. And so I do think, is that the strength of this team? I don't know. I think there are several potentials for that. Yeah, I stole that from you, Chris. But they're in the conversation.
Yeah, it's nothing but a good thing if you have depth, particularly at this position. These are big guys who are in the trenches every single play. And, you don't want to have your defensive tackles feeling like they're playing too many snaps. Real quick, last year, Tonka Hemingway played the most of any defensive tackle, took 519 snaps. Boogie right behind him at 508. And then TJ Sanders, he was like a co-starter last year. He took 479. But after that, it was Nick Barrett with 192. So pretty big drop-off. I think you'll see maybe another guy or two with a little bit more even distribution.
And we talk about how tough of a schedule that Carolina has, especially once you get into that month of October. Having these guys, again, knock on wood, assuming everybody stays healthy, having those guys not be stretched to the limits like they were a season ago with taking all those snaps like Tonka said, that you said, if you're able to evenly rotate these guys through and give them the ability to rest and stay fresh, that's going to benefit you on the latter half of that season. And again, we know how important trench play is in any SEC game. So if you can keep these guys fresher than maybe were a season ago, when you get in those late season contests, hopefully everybody's a little bit healthier than they were this time last year.
There's one thing Will Muschamp used to say that I actually did wholeheartedly agree with, and that's once those big guys get tired, it's very hard for them to get their wind back. And, when, like you said, man, you're in a fourth quarter game, if you can be fresh versus kind of winded and just kind of having to fight through it, basically, that can be the difference in getting a game-changing sack and not. So we'll certainly see how that plays out this year, but a good situation for South Carolina.
Definitely a group to be very excited about for what they're going to bring to the table this upcoming fall. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself and Terry Ford coming up next as we get you set for more Gamecock baseball, taking on Arkansas at the SEC tournament coming up at 2 o'clock right here on The Game.